All right, welcome to stream number 26, my journey in learning FastAPI, which I'll be using to build my favorite, not my favorite, but one of my dream projects, the project I want to build, and I want to choose FastAPI for it. So yeah, let me just check a few things to avoid echoes and to avoid problems. It's interesting how far this journey has come. I keep showing you this just not only to motivate myself, but to show you that yeah, things are possible. We studied Python intro types, concurrency, ASIC, await. After that, I went into the tutorial user guide, went through the first steps, path parameters, query parameters, the request body, through query parameters and string validations, path parameters and numeric validations, query parameter models, body multiple parameters, looked at fields, nested models, an example of how to declare the request, extra data types, cookie parameters, header parameters, cookie parameter models, header parameter models, response model, return type, extra models. Wow, a lot of stuff. The response status code, we went to form data, models, request files and forms and files, handling errors, path, operation configuration, JSON compatible encoder, body updates. We went into dependencies. Yeah, this was a very interesting section. I loved it. Oh, Ernest, how are you doing? I think I remember you from somewhere, Ernest. And you know where we met. Linus says indeed we have come a long way. The good thing is that I have learned a lot. Yeah, that's good. Indeed, we've learned a lot. I think, Ernest, I know you from where I know Linus from. Only that, Ernest, you were in that space earlier. Okay, you know the place. I don't want to mention the name. Oh my God, you had to mention the name. I didn't want to make it about that because people might mistake me for dragging people from that side to this side. Yeah, but indeed it was cohort 17. Uh, how is everything going, Ernest? I'm very curious to know. Yeah, you're one of my cool guys I had in C17. The good old days, the good old SE program. Many people, by the way, who are doing the current LX programs have no idea how cool that program was. You guys, I'm sure like now you understand. If you went to the current ALX website and you looked at it and you compared what is there currently, you can tell the difference. Oh, that's nice. Honest has a new job in Saturn. Wow, that's nice. Is it backend, front end, DevOps, mobile, full stack? So yeah, guys, see, we went into security and we finished security on over the weekend. Okay, interesting. Then after that, now we're into middleware, and all like we have seen have been very simple things. Why? Because I like the way they have organized this stuff like step after step. Okay, one topic builds on another topic. One topic builds on another. So yeah, let me not waste time. Let's get into this. So they're saying you can add middleware to fast API applications. Of course, those who have done backend development before, you know what a middleware is, okay? I'm just learning how to create a middleware or work with middlewares in fast API, but the concept is the same, okay? So of course, like we know, whether you're in any programming language, once you need to create a middleware and you know what a middleware is, all you just need to do is to simply, of course, find out the syntax, how to create it. But ideally, you know what a middleware is and you know what it does. So when you need it, you simply Google, check the documentation, or maybe with some help of AI, find out what it does. But of course, if you don't know, let's you'll learn also that today. And it says full stack intermediate dev focusing on backend more. Oh, that's nice. That's nice. Very soon I'll be sending you an invoice saying, bro, I need pocket money. I'm kidding though. I have my brothers. There's something about being older than someone, especially in the family or something. There's by default, okay? By default, you programmers know what default means. By default, you owe them something, okay? So from time to time, I receive like a call because these guys are not allowed to have phones at school, so I cannot tell who is calling. So I see a random number, unknown number. As soon as I pick up, I hear someone speaking very fast. Oh, Nehemiah, how are you? I'm using a teacher's phone and I want to speak very fast. Please send me some money for pocket money. Boop. They hang up. I'm like, wow. So I have to send my after about like 2 minutes. Have you sent? We're not seeing any message. I'm like, wow. What if I don't have? Okay. What will you do? Yeah, so I don't want to be like those guys. So let's continue. Okay. The saying a middleware is a function that works with every request before it is processed by any specific operation. And just to encourage you, okay, one time I was a beginner and I ended up getting work as a software engineer. Like some of you already know, I've worked as a mentor, okay. Linus, this is to encourage you, okay. So you see, like Ernest came to Alex, and yeah, he's now enjoying what flows into his bank account. Okay, so yeah, it really pays off. So let's continue. Saying a middleware is a function that works with every request before it is processed by any specific path operation, and also with every response before returning it. It takes each request that comes to your application. It can then do something to that request or run any needed code. Then it passes the request to be processed by the rest of the application by some path operation. Okay. And of course, it's obvious. Okay. All requests in FastAPI are processed by path operations. Of course, path operation by now, if you've worked in other backend languages, you just notice a specific term that applies to FastAPI, but ideally, okay, it's the concept is the same. Okay. So it says it then takes the response generated by the application, and again, that response is generated by some path operation. Okay. So ideally, a path operation is responsible for accepting a request, processing it, and returning a response. Okay. But the best way is to say a path operation accepts a request and returns a response. Okay. Of course I know I said that processing, but ideally that would not be, because when I'll be building my project, you'll see I'm going to show you that certain things like processing what has come through the requests, you shouldn't do it in your path operation. Okay. And for those of you who have done things like Node.js, C#, Spring Boot, or even like Django, the concept is the same. Like in Django, they have what they call views. And a view is simply a functional class that accepts a request and returns a response. So same concept, okay? Plana says, thank you. That's why I don't want to leave this community. I have learned a lot. I'm hoping for good soon. Yeah, don't lose hope. As long as you're consistent, okay? You're consistent, apply your skills. Yeah, like what we always talk about. Create your projects and be consistent, okay? You'll see. You just have to put a combination of a number of things, okay? Maybe one time I'll talk about that. you have to put a combination of a number of things for quite a long time, okay, for you to actually make sense out of it. Hello, Franklin. How are you doing? I like Franklin's summary, okay? Says path operation equals to route handler. Yeah. And I think that's the language they use. Is it in Node.js? You'll find in Node.js people talking about things like routes, okay? But route, endpoint, path, URL, you can use them interchangeably, okay? In Node.js, they have things like mounting a router, okay? They have routers actually, but concept is the same. So yeah, path operation equals to route handler. That's correct, Franklin. So let's go on. They say it can do something to that response or run any needed code. Then it returns the response. So yeah, they're just emphasizing the point. So they have a few technical details here. They say if you have dependencies with yield, the exit code will run after the middleware. Okay, remember when we were studying about dependencies in the, for example, in the example that they gave us, okay, we know that they were used to do extra things, okay, extra tasks. One of the extra tasks we saw that time was when, okay, we are closing a database connection, okay, that no matter whatever happens, okay, at the end we must close a database connection, okay. So that's when they close the connection, whether things are successful or things go bad, we have to close. And we saw what an example of exiting, okay. So in that example, exiting was simply closing the database connection, whether an exception happens or not, okay. So they're saying if your dependency has a yield, and of course right now we know what dependencies are, the exit code will run after the middleware, okay. So this is important to know. Otherwise, you can get stuck when debugging. So you're saying if there were any background tasks covered in the background tasks section, you'll see it later. They will run after all the middleware. Okay. So ideally, I think this is the operation. Okay. Your path operation. Then we have middleware. Okay. Or the middleware. Okay. Path operation. Okay. Then you have your dependency. Okay. Then you have now the background task, okay, then finally the path operation finishes. Let me try to show you my understanding, and feel free to correct me, because like you all know, this is my first time learning FastAPI with you. So this is what I think, okay. When a request comes in, it can be intercepted by the middleware, okay. Middleware intercepts it. When the middleware, after the middleware intercepts it, the next thing is it can be given to your path operation, okay. And that path operation can have one or more dependencies, okay. So it goes to the dependency. So let us really say the exit code will run after the middleware, okay. So meaning the middleware must, if the dependency has an exit code, okay, the middleware must finish, okay. So let us say, let me put it in bracket like this, exit, okay, like this, okay. Then after that, I can have, what else? Let me read this. Again, they say if there were any background tasks, they will run after all the middleware. Okay, so then of course you have any let me have, like, for example, I don't know how to background task, okay, like this. Then finally, of course, the path operation must finish, ideally in the end, either way. It must finish. Why? Because a response must be given, okay? But the beginning and the end can be interrupted by this middleware, okay? So they're telling us that any background task runs after a middleware. Why? Because maybe you're doing validations in your middleware, okay? Maybe like checking, maybe the requests details certain specific things, like maybe rate limiting. And you wouldn't want, for example, if I want to limit you to using my application maybe like 5 times in a minute, okay, but there's a background task, maybe like, for example, sending an email. Maybe sending emails is an example of a background task. I would want the rate limiter to use middleware to check the number of times you've accessed maybe the application, okay, before sending you that email. Because then if the background task runs, you receive the email, then again, I block you. This is how I understand it. I don't know what you guys say. I hope I've not confused anybody. Please let me know. Yeah, so this the rough idea, but let's continue reading on. Okay, so they say the first thing is to create a middleware, of course. And they say to create a middleware, you use the decorator app.middleware HTTP on top of a function. So they're saying the middleware function receives, okay, the request. One thing I like about learning is that, and I think which is a trait everybody should pick, is that when you've learned something, okay, and you believe that thing to be true for a long time, you should be able to accept correction, okay, and change your mind and perception about it. Yeah, and especially when it is now wrong, when you discover that it is wrong. So if I'm wrong, I'll admit that I'm wrong and I've misunderstood something. So don't fear to let me know in the chat. So let's go. Let's say the middleware function receives the request. Of course, this is expected. A function call next that will receive the request as a parameter. Yeah, by the way, guys who do Node.js, this should be familiar. When I say call next, in Node.js, they have a function called next, which also takes in the request, okay? And in Node.js, it passes on that to the next middleware in the chain, okay? And if it's not there, then the next, can I say route handler takes over and finishes the request by sending a response. So it's saying a function call next that will receive the request as a parameter. This function will pass the request to the corresponding operation, okay? I mean to the corresponding path operation. Then it returns the response generated by the corresponding path operation. You can further modify the response before returning it. So ideally, middleware receives the request, okay, and a function called call next, okay. So before even looking at the code, I want to imagine maybe you have something like maybe middleware, okay. Let me say I put it up here, okay. I say app dot middleware like that, then pass HTTP. Where am I getting this from? From what they mentioned here, okay, on top of a function. Then it receives a request and call next, okay. So I'm assuming under the hood, okay, they have something like this: define middleware, which takes in the request. AI is cheating for me, guys. Are you seeing? And call next, but rather I'm going to type it manually since I'm learning. Okay, then on the next line, okay, you see they're saying this function will pass the request to the corresponding path operation. Okay, so I'm assuming they have another, the function call next, okay, like that, and it passes in, the request is passed in. Okay, then this is then it returns the response generated by the corresponding path operation. So I'm assuming we have a response, okay, like so. Then it's returned, okay. Again, this is me just trying to understand the explanation, okay. Don't take this as solid truth. We're all learning, but the something that AI suggested. Let me see. Okay, it is similar to what I had, what I did. Okay, only that them they are putting a header. The meaning you can, it's trying to say that you can add a header to the response. Okay, but ideally this is what this explanation means. Okay, that it receives a request and call next, which I've done. Request, call next. Then this function will pass the request to the corresponding path operation. it passes call next, passes the request, okay, and then it returns the response generated. So I get the response from this call next and return it. So this is how I understand it, okay. Linus says, yes, next calls next middleware or handler in the stack for Express.js. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's Express. That's correct. So, hey, by the way, just to let you know, when we shall be building the project using FastAPI, I am going to go ahead to do DevOps. Okay, things like Docker, things like Kubernetes, things like I really want to go into other things that involve data engineering like Kafka. Okay, to do some event-driven things like Redis, Celery, CI/CD. I want it to be like full-fledged so that like people, yeah, who want to learn with me those things and maybe not even learn, but okay, like learn mainly how to integrate them into FastAPI can learn together with me and yeah, expand our knowledge. And who knows, you can clone the project and use it for your own purposes. But yeah, even I'll be using it for my own purpose, like to try to market it. And yeah, I'll share with you the journey too. So yeah, let's see what they have done. So yeah, again, Python 3.8 is the version this works with. They're saying import time from FastAPI, import FastAPI and request. Then they have an instance of FastAPI. We know this, okay? This is just usual Python. Then here's the middleware, okay? They say you put it on top of a function, okay? And remember, they didn't say on top of a path operation, on top of a function. So ideally, I would be wrong for doing this, okay? So let's read, okay? So it is async def, and again we studied asynchronous programming concurrency in the past. They say add process time header, okay? Add process time header. It takes in the requests, okay, and call next. What I didn't do is adding the appropriate type annotation, okay? So yeah, pardon for that, but it's an important thing to always do with FastAPI because we know the advantages of doing that, okay? Then they have a start time, simply the start time, okay, using a path counter. This is regular Python. Then they get a response, they await, call next. You see, this is important of reading things. But I guess it was nice of me to try to understand what it does. Okay, but now I understand that call next is actually an async operation, okay, which is actually a very good thing. So they return the response, and after that, they now get the process time, which is simply the difference between the current time, okay, this is the current time, subtracted from the start time, okay. Then now here they add a header called the process time, and they change it to a string, okay, using this method called str. So they're simply adding a header called x process time to the response, okay, then they return. Simple as that. So you're saying keep in mind that custom property headers can be added using the x prefix, okay. Those who did, people like Ernest know about this X thing because the certain project they did which allowed them to configure servers and they had to add a custom header. Yeah, but of course, if you didn't do their course, still, now we know, okay? That you can add using the X prefix. So X, okay, then the header, the custom header, okay? So they're saying, but if you have custom headers that you want a client in a browser to be able to see, you need to add them to your CORS configuration using the parameter expose headers documented in starlet CORS. So we're going to read about CORS, okay? Cross origin resource sharing. I'll learn about it in the next chapter, and that is tonight, okay? So let's continue. So the main point is you use X to prefix that custom header, and it must be allowed in your calls. We're going to see calls next. Okay. So technical details is saying you could also use from starlet.request import requests. FastAPI provides it as a convenience for you, the developer, but it comes directly from Starlet. Okay, this is good to know. So they're saying before and after the response, you can add code to be run with the request before any path operation receives it. Okay, and they're saying, and also after the response is generated before returning it. For example, you could add a custom header X process time containing the time in seconds that it took to process the request and generate a response. Okay, so if we see here, they simply showing us the same thing. Okay, but the point is that you can run code, okay, before any path operation receives it. Okay, and after the response is generated, but before returning it. Okay, so actually in some frameworks or languages and communities, they call middleware as interceptors. Okay, because ideally you're intercepting the request and the response. Okay, so let's continue. You have a tip. They're saying here we use time.path counter instead of time.time because it can be more precise for these use cases. All right. So they're saying multiple middleware execution order. Yeah, because you might want to run more than one middleware. So they're saying when you add multiple middlewares using either app.middleware decorator or app.add middleware method, each new middleware wraps the application, forming a stack. The last middleware added is the outermost, and the first is the innermost. So you know how it's stacked. We're in a stack of cards, okay? So the last one is on top, okay? And the others are beneath, okay? So if you were to remove one, okay? The first one on top is the one, the last in, first out. So that's how a stack is, okay? Where you pile things on top of the other, just like a stack of books. Yeah, so yeah. The last one you add is the outermost. The first one is the innermost. So they say on the request path, the outermost middleware runs first. On the response path, it runs last. Okay, this is good to know. On the request path, the outermost middleware runs first, meaning the last which was added runs first. Then on the response, it runs last. Interesting. So the behavior changes depending on the whether it's a request or a response. If it is a response, the first one will run last. If it is a request, the first one will run first. So they have an example. They say app.add middleware, okay? And of course, it should be accessible with. So ideally, what I'm supposed to do is this, okay? Something like this. Come on, what is this code? Like this, okay? Then I can now say, let me copy and paste. Okay, so let's say this is middleware 2. Okay, so I can say app.add middleware. Okay, like that. Okay, then I can also add the second one. I just use the AI to autocomplete. So first middleware. So this for every request. Okay, this one will run fast. Okay, but on the response, this one will run last. That is how I understand it. Excuse me. Let's continue. So they said this results in the following execution order: request, middleware B, middleware A. Wow, I've actually interchanged. Do you realize that? Wait, am I tired or what? I've actually interchanged. Okay, look at this case. They say the last middleware is the outermost. the fast is the innermost. On the request path, the outermost middleware runs fast. The response on the response path, it runs last. Yeah, I've actually understood it. I've understood it. I thought I was mixing up my mind. And it says my FIFA knowledge just got upgraded. Wow. Of course you know FIFA, I'm sure. Just a different flavor, maybe, but it's the same thing. So in the request, you see, we get middleware B, okay, running fast. It's the outermost. Why is it the outermost? It was the last item to be added to the stack. This is middleware B, okay. So if in the beginner bullies and ask you, what's the importance of it? Give me a practical example of a stack. You throw them this one. How middlewares work, okay, at least in FastAPI. So this is the outermost, okay, or the one on top of the stack. So in the request, it works fast, then B, then your route or path operation. But for the response, the route, middleware A, meaning the innermost, runs fast. So for the route, for the response, they start from the innermost to the outermost. Then the opposite for the request. Outermost to innermost. Good to know. This stacking behavior ensures that middlewares are executed in a predictable and controllable order. Yeah, this is good. It even makes it easier to debug. They're saying other middlewares. You can later read more about other middlewares in the advanced user guide, advanced middleware. Okay, maybe sometime when we are maybe initially building. Actually, what I think when I'll be building the project from time to time, we shall be checking out these advanced guides once in a while. Or I can even just make a tutorial on that advanced guide. But let's continue, because I think going through this tutorial guide is enough to help you build something, at least in my experience, for things like Spring Boot, Django. You will read about how to handle CORS with a middleware in the next section. All right, and here it is. So I'm just going to give you a minute to digest that, and then we can continue. Let us continue. CORS, cross origin resource sharing. I'm sure anybody who has tried to learn front end fast, okay, or back end fast without knowing the other stack. Let's say maybe you learn back end fast without knowing front end, or you learn front end without learning about back end. You've been disturbed at least by this. Even if you learn both, front end, then you learn back end. By the time when trying to make them connect, everything has been a pain. And by the time you learn to solve it, you realize the solution is something very simple. Crazy. At least for me, I've had that experience. And sometimes early in my career, I would actually forget and repeat the same thing. And I go into the developer console, and I'm like, what's happening? What's this CORS stuff? This already stuff rejecting my stuff. And one time I remember I went to a friend saying, when I execute my endpoints in Postman, they are working. But when I try to use it from my React app, it's not working. This thing is crazy. Then you start cursing. I even followed the tutorial, but it's not working. In the tutorial it works, but for my side it's not working. When I was learning tech, it was a common thing to say that you watch something in a tutorial, it's working for the guy in the video, but not you. Many times when I meet with my friends, we laugh about such moments. So funny. Anyway, let's continue. They say CORS or cross origin resource sharing refers to the situations when a front end running in a browser has JavaScript code that communicates with the backend. The backend is in a different origin than the front end. Yeah, essentially, the front end and the backend are in different origins. So for them to share information, it will be a cross. Okay, front end is in origin A, backend is in origin B. Okay, so ideally, if something in origin A wants to communicate with something in origin B, then they cross because A is different from B. As simple as that. Okay, so let's say the explanation. They say origin is the combination of protocol. Okay, and of course the commonest protocol we know is HTTP. Okay, the earlier one, then HTTPS, which is simply the secure version of HTTP. Then we have the domain, okay, like myapp.com, localhost. I'm sure everybody of us owns localhost, okay. We have localhost.tianglo.com, okay, and a port, okay. So you have the protocol, the domain, and the port. As simple as that. Like if I was to show you mine for this project, the one we know what I use. Okay, you see here in the browser. Then if I can expand this, wow, the tab can't expand itself, only the browser content, but it's locked. And I double click inside. Let me just copy it and go to the editor where I have more control. So if I come here and comment this out, expand it. So you see, if I remove this, okay, I have the first one is the protocol. After that, I have my domain. Then I have the port. So this is what makes up the origin. Okay. So you might find, like, for example, my FastAPI application is what this is the origin for the FastAPI app. Okay. Then the origin for my front end is maybe on this. Okay. Okay. Maybe with a different address. Okay. Or maybe something like my frontend.com. Okay. At that port. Something like that. Okay. Either way, they are still different origins. So take note of that. All right, let's see what they say. So they say an origin is the combination of the protocol, okay, which can be HTTP or HTTPS, a domain, for example, myapp.com, localhost.tianglo.com, and a port like 80.433.8080. And it's saying, so all these are different origins. This one is a different origin, this is a different origin, this is a different origin. And they say even if they are all in localhost, they use different protocols or ports, so they are different origins. Linus says cause error gets everyone learning stuck with backend. Yes, yeah, true. It gets everybody who is learning and stuck with backend and frontend. And I've heard it mostly about among people doing web. I don't know the mobile guys do it, face it, or maybe when guys are learning mobile, they already faced it. Because even by the time I was learning mobile development, I already faced the cause issue. So even if they are all in localhost, they use different ports or protocols, so they are different origins. Okay, so once different origins communicate, that is cross. Okay, you're crossing an origin. So cross origin resource sharing, okay? Because in HTTP or like in REST, we usually share resources. Okay, so let's read the steps. So let's say you have a front end running in your browser at HTTP localhost 8080 and it's JavaScript trying to communicate with the backend running at HTTP localhost. Because we don't specify a port, the browser will assume the default port 80. Then the browser will send an HTTPS options request to the 80 backend. And if the backend sends the appropriate headers authorizing the communication from this different origin, which is HTTP localhost 8080, then, okay, the 8080 browser will let the JavaScript in the front end send its request to the 80 backend, okay? So, and they're saying to achieve this, the 80 backend must have a list of allowed origins. So in this case, the list would have to include HTTP localhost 8080 for the 8080 frontend to work correctly. Yeah, let me summarize this my own way, just to see if I've understood. Okay, I like doing this to test myself. So I'll maybe create a string like this. Okay, so they're saying if the front end, okay, the front end is origin is that, okay, then we have the back end, okay, I need this to be in uppercase like that, okay. But they're saying under the hood, it's actually running on port 80. It will be the default. Okay. Remember the statement? The browser will assume the default port 80. Okay. So what happens is this. Okay. This guy, the front end, first sends to the back end a request having an options operation. Okay. A method. Remember there's get, post, patch. Okay. But option is one of them. Okay. To the backend requesting to find out the available options, what it can do. Okay. Then the backend will respond. Okay. Telling it, okay, you can do A, B, C, D. Okay. And that has to happen before actually the browser, okay, can send its request to the backend, assuming maybe the request was to log in. Okay. The ideal thing which you want to do is to maybe log in. Okay. You want to do maybe your endpoint is this. Okay. You want to log in. And maybe the path is slash API. I want this to be in lowercase slash v1, maybe slash, okay, maybe it's a token, okay, to get a token. So ideally what would happen, this a request with options, with a method being options, meaning I want to get authority from you. Do you authorize me, okay, to request a token? That's the goal you get. And after that, the backend will respond to the front end with a list of options, okay, of allowed domains saying, okay, this guy is allowed, this guy is not allowed, okay. So the backend in its list of allowed origins must have this one here, okay. So there'll be something like allowed. Okay, let me just use this, okay, allowed hosts, something like this, okay. In its list, it should have what? This. Otherwise, this would fail. Even you'll find many people who are learning doing something like this, asterisk, meaning all, allow everybody. Hi Go, how are you doing? Is it Just Go? I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Hello, thank you for joining today's stream. How are you doing? I hope you're learning something together with us. So yeah, that's the whole idea, okay? So you're saying the browser sends an HTTP options to the backend, okay? And the backend sends the appropriate headers authorizing communication from a different origin, okay? But for that to happen, okay, the backend must have a list of allowed origins, okay? Which means in the backend's list of allowed origins, the frontend's origin must be included, okay? Otherwise, it won't work. Then they're saying wildcard, saying it's possible to declare the list as the star or asterisk. They're calling it a wild to say that all are allowed. But that will only allow certain types of communication, excluding everything that involves credentials. Like, for example, cookies, authorization headers like those used with bearer tokens, etc. So for everything to work correctly, it's better to specify explicitly the allowed origins. Yeah, which is a good thing to do. For example, if you don't want people from different sites maybe throwing rubbish, okay, at your API, simply put what an origin. That's one step, okay, of blocking. Tagist Go says, no problem, sir. I'm your big fan. Wow, I'm humbled. I'm humbled. Let's continue. So they say use CORS middleware. Now I like how they organize their documentation. Now that we know what middlewares are. So if you talk about a CORS middle, I know what a middleware is. I know what CORS is. So if you tell me CORS middleware, it clicks in the brain what you're trying to teach me. Okay. So they say you can configure it in your FastAPI application using the CORS middleware. They say import CORS middleware, create a list of allowed origins as strings. And I think in most applications I've seen it as strings. Springboard strings, Express strings, where else? Flask, Django. Add it as a middleware to your FastAPI application. Okay. You can also specify whether your backend allows credentials like authorization headers and cookies, and we have learned this, by the way. I don't know which stream was that, but somewhere where headers and cookies. We have cookie parameter models, header parameters, cookie parameter models, header parameter models. Yeah, it was a nice time learning those things. They now look very easy. They're saying you can also specify whether your backend allows credentials, okay? Specific HTTP methods, post, put, or all of them within the wildcard. Specific HTTP headers, or all of them with the wildcard, okay? So credentials, specific methods, okay, or all of them, specific headers, or all of them, okay? So they say you first import. So this is what they've done. They import CORS middleware from fastapi.middleware.cors, okay? Then they create a list of allowed origins, okay? So this would be essentially front ends, okay, that you allow, okay? Ideally, it can even be another API, okay? So these are the origins. And remember, an origin is made up of the protocol. All these are protocols, okay? Then the domain, okay, like this, the domain. Then finally, the port, okay? And if you don't put the port, they have told us the browser will assume the default port 80, okay? Then when you're done, you say app.add middleware, okay? Then the first middleware you see they have put is the CORS middleware, okay? Then now they specify the allowed origins, okay, which is this list of strings. Then they say allow credentials true. Remember, they say you can specify whether your backend allows credentials, and here they are saying it is true, meaning if it is false, then you don't allow credentials. Allowed methods, they're allowing all, meaning options, get, put, post, delete, patch, okay, all those methods. And they say headers, you're allowing all headers, okay? Yeah, this is simple. Yeah, then you have a basic hello world operation function. So saying the default parameters used by the CORS middleware implementation are strict by default, so you'll need to explicitly enable particular origins, methods, or headers in order for browsers to be permitted to use them in a cross-domain context. So they are strict, know that. So you need to explicitly enable particular origins, methods, and headers. And they're saying the following arguments are supported. Allow origins, we know what that is. A list of origins that should be permitted to make cross-origin requests. For example, these ones here, okay? This one and this one. And you can use the wildcard to allow any origin. They're saying allow origin regex. They're saying a regex, which is simply a regular expression, okay, to match against origins that should be permitted to cross origin requests. For example, this, okay, is a regular expression. And they say allowed methods, a list of methods of HTTP methods that should be allowed for cross origin requests. Defaults to get. You can use asterisk to allow standard methods. Then you allow headers, a list of headers like we have seen, okay, which should be supported for cross-origin requests. Defaults to an empty list, and they're saying you can use the wildcard to allow all headers. They're saying the accept language, content type headers are always allowed for simple CORS requests. Then they have allow credentials, says that indicate that cookies should be supported for cross-origin requests. Defaults to false. Then they're saying none of allow origins, allow methods, and allow headers can be set to wildcard. Okay, if allow credentials is set to true, all of them must be explicitly specified. Okay, so in other words, if we say that allow credentials is true, then we have to specify the origins. We cannot say all origins or all methods or allow all headers. No, you have to say that the header which I want is content type, or the header which I want is maybe post and patch, and the origin you should specify it. So the max edge said sets a maximum time in seconds for browsers to catch CORS responses. Defaults to 600 seconds. Yeah, which is a good feature, by the way. Okay. They're saying the middleware responds to two particular types of HTTP requests. Okay. They're saying CORS preferred requests. They're saying these are any option requests with origin and access control request method headers. In this case, the middleware will intercept the incoming request and respond with appropriate CORS headers with a 200 or 400 response for information purposes. Okay. Then we have what they call a simple request. They're saying any request with an origin header. In this case, the middleware will pass the request through as normal, but will include appropriate CORS headers on the response. Yeah, this sounds self-explanatory, but I need to read it again to make sure I've understood it. Any request with an origin header, okay? In this case, the middleware will pass the request through as normal, but will include appropriate CORS headers on the response. All right. So if you're saying more info about CORS, check out the Mozilla CORS documentation. But this is most of it, okay? Well, when you continue developing and maybe you need something, of course you'll even know that you don't know, and you'll be forced to read the documentation. But I think for this it's enough. They say you could also use from starlet.middleware.cors import CORS middleware, and they're saying FastAPI provides several middlewares in FastAPI.middleware just as a convenience for you, the developer. But most of the available middlewares come directly from Starlet. This is good to know. So all I need to do is just say FastAPI.middleware and I'm done. So yeah, pretty interesting. Okay. So the goal is create a middleware. Okay. How? By you doing this. Okay. Using a decorator. Where is it? This upload middleware on top of a function. That function should take the request, okay, and a function called call next, okay, which will be used to call the next path operation in the sequence, and then it simply returns the response. So yeah, that was simple. After that, what do? They then, when you're done creating your middleware, you then add it by saying app.add middleware. Okay. An example of middleware you can add is the CORS middleware. How do you add CORS middleware? You first import it, okay, from fastapi.middleware.cors. After that, you register it by saying add.middleware, just like any other middleware. But this one here will require you to specify your origins, okay, methods and headers, okay. And your origin is simply a list of strings, and they've explained what an origin is. An origin is made up of a protocol, a domain, and a port. If there's no port, the browser will default it. It will be defaulted to port 80. So yeah, that is it. Tomorrow we'll go into something I told you is one of my most desired to know. Here, SQL databases. I told you my interest was on mainly the following things. Okay, security. Remember, OAuth through. We nailed it. After that, my next point of interest is here. What we are studying is SQL database or SQL. Okay. After that, my next point is this one here, background tasks. Then also this one here, debugging and testing. Yeah, but yeah, so tomorrow we shall be looking at SQL databases. Okay. I think I've spent about almost more than 50 minutes here and I want to end it. Yeah, so yeah, let's meet tomorrow and talk about this. And then yeah, like baby steps, step by step. Yeah, days move, okay? One hour of learning. I don't know how many hours you've spent so far, maybe more than 100, okay? So yeah, let's meet tomorrow when we talk about this and we can, yeah, shall keep going until we finish this and then start the project. Thank you for learning with me. Anne says he can't wait for that. Me too. Thank you, Ernest, for being an active participant. Thank you, Linus. Thank you, Tojest Go, for being active in the stream and learning with me. And Ernest, I was happy to see that you're doing great. It really humbles me. Okay, that's really, really, really good. Have a good rest of your day or morning or evening, or afternoon. You might be I know we're in different places in the world and yeah, different time zones. So bye for now and let's